Good evening and welcome to Election 2020, a Metro Focus special. I'm Jenna Flanagan. When it comes to this year's presidential race, there are plenty of candidates with local ties fighting for your vote. That list is headlined by New York billionaires like former Mayor Michael Bloomberg and, of course, President Trump. Powerhouse progressives such as Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren also have roots here. And let's not forget about New Jersey Senator Cory Booker. Tonight, we're spotlighting these candidates as part of our ongoing special coverage of Election 2020. Here with a closer look at the issues and the questions and the controversy is Dr. Christina Greer, Associate Professor of Political Science at Fordham University and the co-host of the FAQ NYC podcast. J.C. Polanco, a political commentator, attorney, college professor, and former president of the NYC Board of Elections. And Laura Namias, an editorial board member at the New York Daily News. Welcome to everyone.
Thanks, Jenna.
All right, so we've got a lot of people from the city or with ties to the city who are looking at the highest office in the nation. So first, I want to start off with the billionaires, as I mentioned in the intro. And so, of course, we know President Trump, right after his election, decided he was going to be running for office again. But let's look at the mayor that we came to know, and that, of course, is Mike Bloomberg. And I just want to get each one of you, your take on how it is that he came to this decision to enter the race so late and seems to be just standing on commercial power. Because there's been no debates with him. He seems to be skipping some of the early primary states, focusing on Super Tuesday. For lack of a better description, what's up with that?
So I always say Donald Trump is a billionaire with an asterisk. Since we haven't seen his taxes, I'm not convinced that he's a billionaire.
Okay.
So there's Michael Bloomberg, who, was mayor of New York City for 12 years. Mm-hmm. So we can't, underestimate the fact that he does understand governance in a way that, say, a Donald Trump or a Tom Steyer just don't have any electoral experience. Mm-hmm. And I do see a path for Bloomberg. I don't know if it's a winning path, but for someone to invest this much money this late in the game, he was looking at the field and essentially looking at each candidate and saying, they're not connecting with voters the way I think I can. Because he's had his mayor's committee and he was, head of the mayor's foundation or conglomeration, I think it was called. He understands cities in a particular way across the country. And anyone with $52 billion to spend is definitely a threat because he's able to advertise himself on air on ways that other candidates just can't. I mean, they're too busy fundraising and trying to go to the early primary states, which he's already said he's skipping, and he's really just seeding other parts of the country and hopefully making inroads there.
Of course.
Well, the fact is that the Democratic Party has these incredibly ridiculous rules for candidates to be able to debate. We've seen many incredible candidates drop out because they don't meet the threshold, whether it's a number of newspapers that have to show polling data that says that they're viable or X amount of donors or X amount of money. But Michael Bloomberg comes into the scene and says, listen, I can't participate because your rules leave a guy like me out. There's no way that I'm going to have that many voters come in and write me a check. There's no way that I'm going to be able to poll at that level. So I'm going to take my campaign and take it to the TV and radio stations across the country. And I'm going to push back a little bit, Jenna.
Okay.
With the fact that he's just standing on commercial power. This guy has a record. And as the Professor Greer mentions, we're looking at a 12-year record of being the mayor of the most important city in the world. Yes. And that's something that he can go around saying, hey, I did that. There's over 10 million people on any given day in a city that I ran. And I ran the fire department. I ran the schools. And he has a message. And he has a message, I think, that resonates with a lot of Democratic voters. Let's not forget how he has been pivotal in the fight against gun violence in Everytown, USA. He's been vocal on poverty issues around the country. So this is a man who's been philanthropic, has a strong record in the city, has a strong record of experience, and is a rags to riches story, as opposed to the president, who, quite frankly, inherited a lot of that money. So he can talk about things that I think other candidates won't be able to talk about.
Laura?
I think that his candidacy is so interesting, and I agree with Dr. Greer that he has this potential path to the nomination that conforms with the newer reality of our campaigns these days. His ability to completely bypass the traditional machinery by which somebody becomes president, bypassing the early states, bypassing the need to get earned media coverage from newspapers, favorable coverage, bypassing the need to stump everywhere in order to get his message out, and just saturating cable TV with favorable ads, has bumped his poll numbers up in just the last few weeks, so that he's running in 5th in some polls and in 3rd in some states. And that shows he's doing particularly well among voters who don't know that much about the presidential race yet, too, which is also very interesting. But we're dealing with an environment where people are getting their news from Facebook. They are getting their news from TV. They are not fully absorbing all of the policy positions of the Democrats, many of whom, frankly, are not that far apart on any of the issues. And he is just able to play on a much bigger field than everyone else is, who have limited the kinds of donations they're going to take. They've limited the size of the donations they can take, and therefore have constrained their ability to buy the kind of advertising that he has.
He also has relationships with mayors across the country who are sort of starting to seed in some of his message. I think that, he's not a billionaire because he made widgets. He's a billionaire because he understands the media. I mean, he's a media billionaire for a reason. So he understands how information flows out. And if we remember 2001, there were so many New Yorkers who had no idea who he was, and he switched parties because he didn't feel like dealing with the Democratic primary. And if you went to the lobby of your apartment building, it was just thousands and thousands of Bloomberg ads just on the floor, each apartment building, because he would flood your mailbox so many days. Many people in the Postal Service would just put them down and just kind of let them out. So it was just a physical ad. And then he was on the television every day, all day. So when I talked to my students who went home for Thanksgiving across the nation, all of them came back and said, every day on the television, there were Bloomberg ads from Ohio to California. So he has the money to just, if you don't know him, you will know him. And as JC said, you'll also know what he wants you to know. There's so many people who don't really know about him as mayor, so they don't know all about the positive issues about gun safety and climate control and climate change awareness and protecting our watershed, but they also don't necessarily know about stop and frisk and some of the cold-hearted policies that a lot of people of color felt they lived under during the Bloomberg era. So he essentially can create a brand new narrative starting now, and he's able to hire some of the best people across all fields to help get his message out. So I would not, there's so many people who are writing him off, and I'm like, you were mayor of the largest, most important city in the country, if not the world, and he understands media and politics in a way that I think Steyer and even Trump don't.
And I think he knows one more thing. This is about 270 electoral votes. The question is, can he win in this primary in this Democratic Party today? And I don't know. It's tough, considering that the base of the Democratic Party, like the base of the Republican Party, tends to be the furthest out there, the furthest to the left, like in the Republican Party, you have the furthest to the right. I don't know if a centrist message like the one that Bloomberg is selling today is going to be successful right now. I just don't see how he can go through this nomination. I hope that he gets more competitive at the end, just for selfish reasons, being a centrist. But I think that if the Democrats continue to play the game that they have been playing, this idea that if you're not completely pure, I don't want you. If you're not completely perfect, if you have something like stop and frisk that Dr. Greer mentions in your background, I'm going to cancel you out and not even consider you, you may end up in a position where you have a candidate, quite frankly, that can win 5 million more popular votes on Election Day, but will not come close to winning Wisconsin, Michigan, or Pennsylvania and guarantee President Trump a re-election. I think a guy like Michael Bloomberg can, if he gets through the nomination, because not only does he have the money to flood those 3 states, like you just mentioned, but I think his message will bring the 50,000 people that you need to bring in those 3 states to get him to 270.
Well, we've mentioned stop and frisk a couple times, and I do want to throw to a clip of Mayor Bloomberg sort of giving an apology, if you will, for the policy that he enacted and how it affected so many New Yorkers. So here's the mayor.
I now see that we could and should have acted sooner and acted faster to cut the stops. I wish we had. I'm sorry that we didn't. But I can't change history. However, today, I want you to know that I realized back then I was wrong, and I'm sorry. But I also want you to know that I am more committed than ever to ending gun violence.
So this is kind of what I was getting at with my question about the fact that he seems to be, using a lot of his money to buy commercials so that people can get to know him and he can craft the narrative. But it feels like a very hands-off campaign, whereas a lot of other people, when they're campaigning, it's almost like this, communal, you want to have a beer with me, I want to hug you, let me cradle your baby kind of campaign. He's not doing that.
But that's not who he is. I mean, if we remember in 2001, again, he did not have a primary. I mean, Bloomberg is not a primary type person. He's in the general. And I think that in a general, he's a different type of candidate. I don't know if he'll make it out of the primary. But Bloomberg is here to say, I'm not here to be your friend. I'm actually here to be the leader. We've got major issues on the table, and I'm the one who can solve them. And unfortunately, for a lot of people in, let's just say, New York specifically, his apology about stop and frisk is too little too late because it came, however many years and months after he's left office. When you think about, say, voters of color in the South, or voters of color who have nothing to do with New York, it doesn't resonate in the same way. And they're looking at, okay, so the city's in great financial health under Bloomberg. There are other issues, especially gun control, that he seems to be a leader. So it's the stop and frisk conversation is there, but it's definitely not as resonant and palpable as it is for many, say, Black and Latinx New Yorkers. And so I think that it's a road bump for him, but it's not an Achilles heel in the way that I think when he first announced, many people thought it would be.
Well, it seems like to the extent that the candidates projecting an air of charisma and friendliness and someone you want to have a beer with, that the end goal is to convince people that the majority of people like you. It seems like one of the things that matters most to the Democratic voters who will be casting their ballots in the primary states is who can beat Donald Trump. I mean, part of the reason that so many people are so divided on this right now is that they're waiting to see who actually is the most electable by waiting for the early state primary results and to see who everybody else wants and who ends up tipping the nomination. And so to that extent, electability is just about whoever can create the air of inevitability, whether you do that through charisma or personality, or whether you do that by flooding the zone with money and just a show of force means different means to the same end.
This stop question frisk issue is very big. People can differ as to did it work, and I think those debates were exciting to have. I know I participated a great deal in those debates. The issue that I'm having is how far are other candidates in the Democratic Party going to take the anti-stop question frisk issue against Michael Bloomberg? If they go in and make it the issue where they're going to zone in on him to try to defeat him and try to make it so that he no longer spends any more money, you may bruise him up so much that you'll keep a lot of African American and Latino and Latina voters without having to come out in November because they're not excited about a candidate. And we saw that in 2016. A lot of minority voters weren't excited about Hillary. They stayed home. And then Donald Trump won this election by what amounts to Yankee Stadium filled to capacity. So I'm really concerned as to how far are Bernie Sanders supporters going to take this issue? How far are Elizabeth Warren voters going to drive this idea that Michael Bloomberg is a racist because he participated in Stop, Question, and Frisk? I'm very concerned as to the purity tests that are being held in the primaries because I think it may make him DOA by the time that this is all over.
And of course, that brings me to my second group of candidates, the progressives, who we are seeing running for the nomination. And of course, Elizabeth Warren, who spent some time in college here, Bernie Sanders, he's Brooklyn. But I'm wondering, as you were saying, the purity test or the insistence that the party has to pull in this one direction and that this is where the party's base really is that something that any of you see playing well on the national stage? Because again, the people who end up deciding this election don't really seem to fit into those baskets, but they are so engaged and so energized.
Well, I mean, I think right now the Democratic Party is in the midst of a real sort of moment in the sense that they don't know if they want to go to the progressive direction and just sort of we will be the party of the progressives, where if you say you are a big D Democrat, then it means X. Or do you want to be a centrist level Democratic Party where you can try and get moderates and weak-leaning Republicans and weak-leaning Democrats and sort of capture more people. I think we also have to remember, though, there's so many Black and Latinx voters not in, say, northeastern cities who are not progressives, right? I mean, when you look at the polling data, they are more conservative than, say, they are portrayed to be. And so, just because the phenotype may sort of make people assume that it's about hyper-progressive politics, that's actually not what the data has shown us over the past several decades. So that's where I'm curious about who survives a primary, because the people who participate in primaries aren't necessarily representative of the entire Democratic Party and the diversity there within. So a Bloomberg in the general, I think, does very well. A Bloomberg trying to get out of the primary with such abysmal turnout amongst all voters of all colors and all classes, then I think that that's a larger conversation.
Laura, I saw you want to get in.
For Bernie and for Elizabeth Warren, so much of their appeal seems to be based in a desire among, I think, a lot of voters to address these systems that we have identified with a big D Democratic policy for years that we just know haven't worked. Healthcare is outrageously expensive. Drugs are outrageously expensive. You can ask anybody, they don't want to change their insurance policy, but are they happy with it? Is it perfect? Absolutely not. So their ability to project, I mean, saying that we need radical change in healthcare, is that really such a radical idea? Is it ultra progressive to say that these systems that don't work are broken and need to be changed? And I think that all of the candidates are actually saying that. They're just saying it and packaging it in different ways to appeal to different parts of the Democratic Party. It's whether or not you wrap up fundamental changes to the national healthcare apparatus as like incremental change, or whether you say that we're eventually going to shift and entirely abolish the model that we're using. That's where the candidates are falling on the spectrum. I think that is something that appeals to everybody, and particularly for Bernie. One of the things that seems to appeal to his voters is his authenticity. And this is something that also seems to appeal to Trump's voters. He is not a hypocrite in a lot of ways. He is consistent. He is ideologically the same person that he's always been. And that's something that a lot of people are thirsty for in politics today. They don't want to see somebody who is a fair weather Democrat who shifts with the winds and who's trendy. They want somebody who is being themselves.
Well, it's very interesting you say that, because we actually have a clip of Senator Sanders alluding to his authenticity over the years.
Yeah, I'm 78, plead guilty. But the advantage, there is an advantage. And that is, unlike all these kids I'm running against, you can check my record going back a long way. You can a long way.
So is it more about where you have stood the whole time, or will voters be looking more towards what have you actually done?
I really think it's the latter. I mean, what have you done and what will you do, right? That's really what they're interested in. You mentioned a little earlier about how are party politics changing the discourse around the country. I think it's changing it big time, right? The Democrats right now are solidly a progressive party. I know they're fighting as to where they're going to be centrist. A lot of us that are moderate Republicans are saying, please be centrist. We can vote for your candidate if you at least give in a little. You need moderates. And what we see with people like Warren and Bernie Sanders is this incredibly radical agenda that is so far beyond anything we can recognize. You say these differences are in small packages. When you tell union members that you're going to take their insurance away and supplement it with something else or replace it with something else after they've been picketing and fighting to get the insurance that they have, you're never going to get the union vote. It's never going to happen. When you tell people that work for a living, that have insurance through their jobs, that they're going to get their insurance replaced with some universal Medicaid-like system, you're going to lose their support immediately. So there are big differences, and both sides are playing a very dangerous game. And the Republican side has gone so far to the right that you're looking at maybe 4% of the party, 5% of the party identifies as moderate to even liberal anymore. So it's changed the national discourse incredibly.
Well, I think. I'm sorry.
And I'm sorry, I know you asked something else, but I was dying to dovetail with Dr. Greer's point a little earlier.
Well, I think we also have to remember, and this is, the great political scientist Charles Hamilton said this in 1973, especially about African American voters, but I think it can apply to sort of Democratic voters right now, which is that there's the protectionist phase and there's the advancement phase. And I think a lot of Democratic voters do believe that just as Laura said, healthcare is out of control. We know bankruptcies are the reason why most people, healthcare is the reason why most people go bankrupt. I mean, it's just, do we blow up the ship, rebuild it and set it a sail, or someone more like Biden and I would say Buttigieg, which is, well, the ship is sort of in the wrong direction, let's just rewrite the ship. Whereas Warren and Bernie Sanders are saying, no, the entire ship is corrupt, we must change everything. And I think you ask a lot of black voters, especially outside of northeastern cities, do they want to completely blow up the system and start anew? And they're like, no, that's a little too much, right? The data shows us, it's like, we'll stay in protectionist phase because that's sort of what we know, and we'll go with someone who may not advance us the way we want to be ideally, but that's too risky of a choice. So an Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders may ideologically deep down sort of say something about health care that a lot of voters, especially not in northeastern cities, agree with, but that's advancement phase, and that's something that's a gamble, especially as Laura and I have talked about on other shows, where so many Democratic voters, male Democratic voters, have been explicit about not voting for Elizabeth Warren. They've said it, they believe it, and so then that changes the calculus of other voters who want to make sure that they choose a candidate that has this electability.
Before we run out of time, sorry, I do, and I feel terrible, but we can't forget about Cory Booker. I feel like that's a larger point in general.
Isn't that what he always says in the debate?
Yes, but how do we see a candidate like himself fitting into this? I mean, he's fought so hard to make it onto some of the debate stages. He missed the last one. Where do you see Cory going for 2020?
He is in this difficult position because he is actually a more moderate and more centrist in a lot of his positions and a lot of his record and his support for charter schools and his relationships with the tech community. And he doesn't, and Wall Street, and he doesn't capture the zeitgeist and get as much coverage as any of the other candidates who are newer to the national stage or the national conversation. He's just had difficulty breaking through, especially when he's sort of in the middle of the pack policy-wise. He's not being focused on as the extreme of any of the candidates in the race, and that makes it difficult to get your voice out there, to raise enough money to meet the threshold, and it just spirals from there.
I feel terrible for Senator Booker. I honestly do. Here you have a man who does not come from money, comes from nothing, becomes this big time guy, becomes mayor of Newark, becomes a U.S. senator, an African American U.S. senator from New Jersey. That's a big deal, and it's like we don't even care. That's incredible. When I see guys like Senator Booker, Secretary Castro not registering, and a guy like Andrew Yang come in and says he's good at math and playing on stereotypes, offering people $1,000, and he's on the radar, I'm like, what is up with this Democratic Party? How is it possible that you have a guy like Julian Castro not on, a person like Senator Booker not on, and it's okay in this Democratic Party that so identifies with minority voters, who needs minority voters, who can't survive without African-American women and African-Americans and Latino and Latinas supporting them, and there's not one on stage? It speaks volumes as to where the Democratic Party is going now that a guy like Senator Booker doesn't register.
Well, he's also from a middle-class family, so he's not a rags to riches story.
No,
but
you say rags to riches.
Okay, but I mean, his parents were solidly middle-class and integrated their white neighborhood. But I will say, though, his record, though, as mayor, if he does sort of start to surge in the polls, his record as mayor is going to come under some serious scrutiny, and their water crisis sort of began under his leadership. His relationship with Betsy DeVos and the charter schools will come into question. There are a lot of things that his moderate stance as mayor of Newark will definitely, I think, serve as a real Achilles heel for him if he actually does surge in the polls. But again, we know that unfortunately, Black and Latinx voters do not give to campaigns in a political tithing sense because also the economics of sort of how we're paid less than
Yes.
white voters contributes to all these inequities that then trickles up to the candidates not being on stage.
All right, well, this was a great conversation. I feel like we covered everything in the way that it's presented in the media. Most of our time was spent with Bloomberg. We argued about policy, and then, of course, we did not forget about Cory Booker, so that was important. Thank you all for joining me.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, too. Thanks for watching Election 2020, a Metro Focus special. For more information on our coverage, head over to our website at metrofocus.org or follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Have a great night.